The days following Marcus's email request blurred together in a whirlwind of meetings and decisions. I found myself staying late at the office, not because I needed to, but because I was avoiding making a final decision about my brother. The Seattle rain tapped against my office window as I scrolled through his resume for the 10th time. On paper, he was qualified. Overqualified, even. His experience at Green Tech would be valuable, particularly as we expanded into new markets. But this wasn't about qualifications. This was about trust. Maya knocked on my doorframe, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Still obsessing over your brother's resume?" she asked, setting 1 cup on my desk. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Is it that obvious? You've been staring at the same document for days." She took the seat across from me. "Look, as your technical director, I'd say he's a solid hire. As your friend who's heard all about how he treated you, I have concerns." She wasn't wrong. Marcus had done more than just dismiss my ideas. He'd actively attempted to undermine my company in its infancy. The memory of him trying to convince Jackson to withdraw funding still stung. "People can change," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced of my own words. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Sure, when forced to by circumstances. The question is whether you want someone working here who only believes in what we're doing because they have no other options." The truth of her statement hung in the air between us. Econova wasn't just a business to me. It was a vision, a community of people who believed in making sustainable energy accessible to everyone. Every person we hired needed to share that commitment. "I'll sleep on it," I told her, though sleep had been elusive lately. After Maya left, I pulled up the company calendar. Our investor meeting was in 2 days, and Noah was expecting comprehensive expansion plans. Marcus would have to wait. I had an empire to build. The investor meeting went better than expected. Noah had brought in 2 additional venture capital, firms interested in our next funding round. Our prototype for commercial-scale systems had outperformed projections, and pre-orders were flooding in from businesses looking to reduce their carbon footprint and energy costs. "You've exceeded every benchmark we set," Noah said as we walked out of the conference room. $20 million in Series B funding is all but guaranteed. The question now is scale. How quickly can you ramp up production? It was a good problem to have, but still a problem. Our current facility was operating at capacity. Expansion meant new space, new equipment, new personnel. "We've been scouting locations," I told him. "There's an industrial complex in South Seattle that would quadruple our manufacturing capacity, but staffing will be the challenge. We need experienced engineers and production managers who understand both the technology and our mission." Noah's eyes gleamed with the look I'd come to recognize, the excitement of potential. "I might have some connections at Pacific Engineering. They've had layoffs recently. Good people with exactly the skill set you need." I nodded, making a mental note. "Send me the names. We'll need to move quickly." As I drove home that evening, I couldn't help but think about Marcus. If we were scaling up this dramatically, experienced project managers would be essential. Despite everything, my brother understood the industry and had managed large teams at Green Tech. Was I letting personal history cloud my professional judgment? My phone rang through the car speakers. It was my mother. "Alexandra? Are you there?" Her voice sounded strange, tentative almost. "I'm here, Mom, driving home. Everything okay?" A pause. "I heard about Marcus, that he applied to work for your company." Of course he'd told them. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Did he send you to advocate for him?" "No, nothing like that." Another pause. "Actually, I wanted to apologize." The words were so unexpected that I nearly missed my exit. My mother, Eleanor Chen, who had never admitted being wrong about anything in my entire life, was apologizing? 4 years ago, when you told us about your plans, I thought you were throwing away everything you'd worked for. I was scared for you, and I let that fear come out as dismissal." She took a breath. "I was wrong, Alexandra. What you've built, it's extraordinary." I pulled into my apartment complex but remained in the car, needing to focus on this conversation. "Thank you for saying that, Mom. It means a lot. Your father feels the same way. He's too proud to call you himself, but he's been following every article about Econova. He has a folder, Alexandra, a folder of news clippings about your company. The image of my stoic father, carefully cutting out newspaper articles about Econova, saving them like childhood report cards, made my throat tighten unexpectedly. We'd like to visit," she continued. "See your company if that's all right. Maybe help you celebrate this new investment round?" I blinked in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "It was announced in the Seattle Business Journal this morning. $20 million, Alexandra. I can't even fathom it." The news had moved faster than I'd expected. Noah must have informed his partners immediately after our meeting. "I'd like that," I said finally, "for you and Dad to visit." After ending the call, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing the conversation. My mother's apology, my father's secret collection of Econova news, the imminent expansion of the company, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Marcus's job application still awaiting a decision. The next morning, I arrived at the office with renewed clarity. I called HR and asked them to schedule an interview with Marcus for later that week. Not a courtesy interview, but a proper assessment with our full hiring panel. If he wanted to join Econova, he would need to earn it. Then I called a meeting with our core leadership team to discuss the expansion. Maya was there, along with our operations director, finance lead, and Jackson, who had transitioned from early investor to our chief strategy officer. "The Series B funding is confirmed," I announced, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. $20 million to scale operations. "We're going to take the South Seattle facility." The room erupted in celebratory exclamations and high fives. These people had been with me through the lean times, the uncertainty, the 18-hour days. They deserved this victory as much as I did. "There's more," I continued once the noise died down. "With the new facility, we're looking at adding at least 50 new positions across engineering, production, and administration." Maya whistled. "That's doubling our current team size. Hiring and training will be intense." "Noah has connections at Pacific Engineering," I said. "Their recent layoffs might be our opportunity," and I hesitated, then decided transparency was important. "My brother Marcus has applied for a position. He was recently let go from Green Tech." The room went silent. They all knew the story, how my family had dismissed my vision, how Marcus had tried to interfere with our early funding. Jackson was the first to speak. "Are you sure that's wise, Alex? Given the history?" "I'm not sure of anything," I admitted. "But he's qualified, and we need experienced people. He'll go through the same interview process as anyone else. No special treatment." Maya nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But I want to be on that interview panel." I smiled gratefully. Wouldn't have it any other way. As the meeting continued, we outlined our expansion strategy, the timeline for the new facility, hiring priorities, production targets for the coming year. The energy in the room was electric. This small company that had started in my garage was now poised to become a significant player in the renewable energy industry. Later that day, as I was reviewing architectural plans for the new facility, Jackson appeared in my doorway with 2 bottles of local craft beer. "Figured we should mark the occasion," he said, placing one in front of me. "Not every day you secured $20 million in funding." I accepted the bottle gratefully. "Remember when you gave me that first $50,000 and everyone thought you were crazy?" "Including your brother," he noted with a wry smile. "Speaking of which, are you really considering hiring him?" I took a sip of beer, appreciating the hoppy bitterness. "I'm considering interviewing him," there's a difference. Jackson settled into the chair across from me. You know what they say, never mix family and business. Too late for that warning, I pointed out. My family has been entangled with this business from the beginning, just not in the way I'd hoped. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both contemplating how far we'd come from those early days of soldering components in my garage. My parents want to visit, I said finally. Mom called yesterday. She actually apologized for not believing in me. Jackson raised his eyebrows. That's unexpected. Tell me about it. Apparently my father has been collecting news articles about Econova. The same father who said innovation only happens in established companies? I nodded, still processing it myself. People change, I guess, when forced to by circumstances. Jackson recognized Maya's words from earlier. Is that what you're hoping for with Marcus? That circumstances have changed him? It was the question I'd been avoiding. Did I believe Marcus had genuinely recognized the value in what I'd built? Or was he simply out of options? I don't know, I admitted. That's what the interview is for. 3 days later, I watched through the glass wall of our conference room as Marcus arrived for his interview. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He looked different, less confident than I remembered, his posture slightly diminished as he checked in with reception. Gone was the arrogance that had defined him throughout our childhood and early careers. Maya intercepted me as I moved toward the conference room. Remember, you're observing only. No jumping in, no special questions. We treat him like any other candidate. I nodded, grateful for her firmness. It would be too easy to let emotions, positive or negative, influence the process. The interview lasted 90 minutes. I watched from an adjacent room with a one-way window, studying my brother as he answered the panel's questions. He was prepared, articulate, and surprisingly humble, acknowledging mistakes made at Green Tech without prompting, expressing genuine admiration for Econova's approach to innovation. When asked directly about why he wanted to join us, his answer surprised me. I was wrong, he said simply. I was part of a company that refused to see the future of energy storage because we were too invested in protecting our existing models. Alexandra, Dr. Chen, saw what we couldn't or wouldn't. I want to be part of a company that leads change rather than resists it. After the interview concluded and Marcus left, the panel discussed his candidacy without me present. I'd removed myself from the decision-making process, trusting my team to make the right call based on merit alone. Maya found me in my office an hour later. Well, I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. He's qualified, she said. Technically strong, good management experience. The reference check with his former direct reports at Green Tech was surprisingly positive. They said he fought for their ideas, created space for innovation within a resistant culture. I raised an eyebrow. But there's the elephant in the room. He tried to sabotage us in the early days. He's your brother. He's only here because Green Tech laid him off. She crossed her arms. The panel is split. I considered this. What's your recommendation? Maya sighed. If he wasn't your brother, we'd probably hire him. We need his experience for the expansion, but given the history, she trailed off. Give him a 6-month contract, I decided. Project-based, focused on setting up production processes at the new facility. That gives both sides an exit strategy if it doesn't work out. Maya nodded. I'll have HR draw up the offer. The next day, I had the strange experience of signing an employment contract for my own brother. 6 months, project manager for the new facility launch, reporting to our operations director, not directly to me. Clear deliverables, clear boundaries. If he succeeded, both he and Econova would benefit. If he failed, we'd part ways professionally with minimal disruption. I was about to email the contract to HR when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Just landed in Seattle. Hotel check-in at 3? Dinner tonight? Right. My parents were visiting. In the whirlwind of expansion planning and Marcus's interview, I'd almost forgotten. Now they would be here just as we were finalizing the contract with their son, their favored child, who now needed his little sister to rescue his career. I texted back, "Dinner at 7. I'll send a car." It was time to face my family, all of them, from a position of strength I'd never imagined possible 4 years ago. The restaurant I selected overlooked Elliott Bay, with the Olympic Mountains visible in the distance on clear days. It was upscale without being pretentious, the kind of place where business deals were celebrated rather than negotiated. I arrived early, securing a corner table with privacy and a view. My parents arrived together, looking oddly tentative as they approached the table. My father, Richard Chen, had more gray in his hair than I remembered, and he'd lost weight. My mother, always impeccably put together, seemed to have aged beyond the 3 years since I'd last seen them. "Alexandra," my father said, his voice gruff with emotion as he reached for my hand. "You look well." "Successful," my mother added, with a small smile. "It suits you." We exchanged awkward hugs before settling into our seats. The conversation started cautiously, neutral topics about their flight, the Seattle weather, changes to the city since they'd last visited. I let them lead, curious about what had really brought them here after years of minimal contact. After the server took our order, my father cleared his throat. "Your company, EcoNova, the technology you've developed, it's remarkable." Coming from him, this was practically effusive praise. "Thank you," I said simply. "I didn't understand it at first," he continued, looking down at his hands. "When you left Green Tech, I thought you were being impulsive, throwing away security for some experiment." My mother jumped in. "We were worried, Alexandra. Not doubtful, just worried." I raised an eyebrow. "You called me delusional, Mom. Those exact words." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I was wrong. We were wrong." "We're proud of you," my father added quietly. "What you've built is extraordinary. The impact you're making renewable energy affordable for average households, it matters." The validation I'd once desperately craved now felt strangely hollow. "I appreciate that. But I didn't build EcoNova to make you proud. I built it because I believed in the vision when no one else did." My father nodded slowly. "That's what makes a true innovator. I should have seen it sooner." Our food arrived, providing a welcome break in the conversation. As we ate, my parents asked increasingly specific questions about the company. How many employees we had, our manufacturing processes, our future plans. It was becoming clear they had indeed been following EcoNova's progress closely. Finally, my mother broached the subject I'd been waiting for. "Marcus told us he interviewed with your company." I took a sip of wine before responding. "He did." "And?" my father prompted. "And we're offering him a 6-month contract, project-based, focused on our expansion." Relief washed over their faces, followed quickly by something more complex. Perhaps the uncomfortable recognition that their children's traditional roles had been reversed. "He wants this, Alexandra," my mother said earnestly. "Not just for the job, though he needs that, of course, but because he truly believes in what you're doing. He admits he was wrong." I nodded. "I hope so. For his sake and for EcoNova's." My father studied me with new eyes. "You're different. Not just successful, you've changed." "I had to," I replied simply. "Building something from nothing changes you. Every setback, every small victory, every moment of doubt when you choose to keep going anyway, it reshapes you." As dinner concluded, My father surprised me by asking if they could tour the company the next day. "We'd like to see what you've built," he said, "if that's all right." I agreed, secretly pleased at the opportunity to show them the physical manifestation of my delusion. We parted with promises to meet at EcoNova's headquarters the following morning. The next day dawned bright and clear, rare for Seattle in spring. I arrived at the office early, feeling strangely nervous about my parents' visit. I wanted them to see what I'd accomplished, but I also wanted to protect the sanctuary I'd built for myself and my team. Maya found me arranging project displays in the main conference room. "Everything okay? You seem tense." "My parents are touring the facility today." Understanding dawned on her face. "Ah, the grand reveal. Need moral support?" I smiled gratefully. "Maybe. They're bringing a lot of history with them." "History. You've thoroughly disproven," she reminded me. "Remember that." When my parents arrived, I was struck again by how uncertain they seemed, so different from the confident, sometimes overbearing presence of my childhood. I led them through the facility, starting with the R&D lab where our next-generation prototypes were being developed, then to the production floor where our current models were assembled and tested. My father asked detailed engineering questions, clearly impressed by the innovative approach we'd taken. My mother noted the diversity of our team and the collaborative atmosphere. Neither mentioned Marcus or his pending contract, though I could sense the subject hovering between us. The tour concluded in my office, where framed articles about EcoNova lined one wall. Our first feature in a local tech blog, the cover story in Renewable Energy World, the Seattle Business Journal announcement of our Series B funding. My father stood before this wall of recognition, hands clasped behind his back. "You have a folder of these too," he said quietly. I smiled, remembering what my mother had told me. "I heard about your collection." Started after that first small piece. "In the tech blog," he admitted. "I've kept every mention of EcoNova since then." My mother touched his arm gently. "Your father checks Google alerts for your company every morning, first thing with his coffee." I blinked, surprised by this revelation. "Even when you thought I was making a mistake?" My father turned to face me. "Alexandra, I never thought you would fail. I thought you were taking an unnecessary risk when a safer path was available." He gestured toward the office, the facility beyond. "But this proves something I should have recognized long ago. There's a difference between risk and vision. You saw possibilities the rest of us couldn't imagine." It was perhaps the closest thing to a full apology I would ever receive from my father. I nodded, accepting it for what it was. "Have you decided about Marcus?" my mother asked hesitantly. "The contract is being finalized," I confirmed. "He starts next week, assuming he accepts our terms." "He will," my father said with certainty. He knows what an opportunity this is, not just the job, the chance to be part of something meaningful. As I walked my parents out, my mother hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry we didn't believe in you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing in yourself enough for all of us." After they left, I returned to my office and sat quietly, absorbing everything that had transpired. 4 years ago, I'd driven away from their house in Portland, their skepticism burning in my ears. Now they had traveled to Seattle to witness firsthand what that delusion had become. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Just received. The contract. Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down." I stared at the message, contemplating how to respond. Finally, I typed, "This is a professional opportunity based on your qualifications. Prove your value to the team, not to me." Seconds later, he replied, "Understood and deserved." Perhaps people really could change when circumstances forced them to confront their errors. Or perhaps the truth was simpler, that we all evolve as we face new challenges, new information, new perspectives. I gazed out at the Seattle skyline, contemplating the next phase of EcoNova's growth. The South Seattle facility would triple our production capacity. The commercial applications of our technology were just beginning to be explored. The vision I'd defended in my parents' dining room was becoming reality on a scale even I hadn't fully imagined. My phone rang. Noah, calling about the finalized terms of our Series B funding. I turned away from the window and back to the present. The past, my family's doubt, the struggle to be taken seriously, the isolation of those early days had shaped me, but it didn't define what came next. Noah, I answered brightly. Let's talk about the future. I stared at the email on my screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. 5 years ago, the sender, my own brother Marcus, had laughed in my face when I told him about my plans to revolutionize home solar technology. Alexandra Chen, the dreamer, he'd said, not bothering to hide the mockery in his voice. Always chasing fantasies instead of putting that engineering degree to good use. Now, here he was, with an expertly crafted resume attached, asking if EcoNova Solutions had any senior positions available. The Seattle skyline gleamed through my office windows, the afternoon sun catching on the solar panels that dotted the buildings across the bay, many of them installed by my company. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the irony sink in. From a converted garage with secondhand equipment to a corner office in our own building with over 200 employees. From delusional to visionary. From family disappointment to industry disruptor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The family dinner that changed everything happened on a rainy Portland evening in December. I'd driven 3 hours from Seattle, rehearsing my presentation the entire way. At 26, with an engineering degree from MIT and 2 years working at Green Tech Industries, the safe career path my parents had always envisioned for me, I was about to announce I was quitting to pursue my own venture. You're going. To do what? My father's fork clattered against his plate. Richard Chen had built his entire identity around being the level-headed engineer who had climbed the corporate ladder at Boeing for 30 years. Risk was a 4-letter word in our household. I've developed a new approach to solar energy storage, I explained, my voice steadier than I felt. The current solutions are too expensive for average homeowners. My design could cut costs by almost 40% while improving efficiency. My mother Eleanor exchanged glances with my brother Marcus. That look, I'd seen it my entire life. The silent communication that I was once again being difficult. Alexandra, my mother said, using my full name, never a good sign. You have a secure position at Green Tech. People would kill for that stability. This isn't some impulsive decision, I countered, pulling out my tablet. I've been working on this for 18 months. Look at the projections. Marcus laughed, not even bothering to look at my carefully prepared business plan. Alex, be realistic. Do you know how many startups fail in the first year? Especially in tech, especially in green energy. The big players will crush you before you even get off the ground. I turned to my father, hoping for at least a hint of support. Dad, you always taught me to solve problems that matter. This matters. Current renewable energy solutions aren't accessible to most people. I can change that. He sighed, removing his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose, his signature move when disappointed. There's a difference between solving problems and tilting at windmills, Alexandra. Innovation happens inside established companies, not garage startups with no funding. I have funding, I said quietly. Jackson's family invested, and I have interest from 2 angel investors in Seattle. Jackson Williams? My mother scoffed. Your college friend with the trust fund. That's not real investment, Alexandra. That's charity. The conversation deteriorated from there. By dessert, the consensus was clear. I was throwing away a promising career for a delusional fantasy. My brother, 3 years older and already a director at a prestigious engineering firm, delivered what he thought was the final blow. When this inevitably crashes and burns, don't expect green tech to take you back. I won't put my reputation on the line twice. I drove back to Seattle that night, windshield wipers fighting against the downpour, my parents' words echoing in my head. For a moment, just a moment, doubt crept in. Was I truly being delusional? Was the security of corporate life really worth sacrificing for this dream? The next morning, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at my laptop screen. My resignation letter to Green Tech was drafted but unsent. One click, and I'd be committed. One click, and there would be no safety net. My phone rang. It was Sofia Rivera, my former professor and mentor from MIT. Alex, I just reviewed the prototype data you sent. These numbers, they're really promising. Have you secured the patent? Yet? A rush of certainty flowed through me. Filing tomorrow. And I'm resigning from Green Tech today. Bold move. I could hear the smile in her voice. You know, I've consulted for every major player in the industry. What you've designed here? It could change the residential market entirely. That conversation with Sophia was the confirmation I needed. I hit send on my resignation letter and officially incorporated Econova Solutions the same day. My family might see delusion, but Sophia, someone who actually understood the technology and the market, saw potential. The first 6 months were brutal. I converted half of my garage apartment into a workshop, sleeping on a futon in the remaining space. Every penny from my savings went into equipment and patent filings. Jackson Williams, my friend from MIT who'd believed in me enough to invest the first $50,000, helped me navigate the early legal hurdles. Your brother called me, Jackson mentioned one evening as we worked late, soldering components for our third prototype. Tried to convince me to pull my investment, said I was enabling your flight of fancy. I almost dropped the circuit board I was holding. He did what? Jackson shrugged. Told him I'd trust your engineering skills over his business acumen any day. That didn't go over well. The betrayal stung, but it also hardened my resolve. If Marcus was actively trying to sabotage my venture, then some part of him must believe I could succeed. Otherwise, why bother? The real breakthrough came 3 months later. Our third prototype exceeded even my optimistic projections, showing an efficiency rate that would legitimately disrupt the market. I recorded the test results with shaking hands, triple-checking the numbers because they seemed too good to be true. That night, I called Sophia. We did it, I said, too excited to even greet her properly. The new configuration works. We're getting 43% higher efficiency than commercial systems at 2/3 the production cost. Send me everything, she replied immediately, and clear your calendar next week. There's someone you need to meet. That someone was Noah Taylor, a venture capitalist who specialized in green technology. Sophia had arranged a meeting at his San Francisco office, a place so sleek and modern it made me acutely aware of my scuffed boots and the coffee stain on my sleeve that wouldn't quite wash out. So you're the solar revolutionary, Noah said, skipping the small talk after I was shown into his office. Sophia rarely makes personal recommendations. When she does, I listen. I placed my prototype on his desk, a compact black box with deceptively simple lines. This can store solar energy more efficiently than anything currently on the market, at a price point accessible to middle-class homeowners, not just wealthy early adopters. Noah didn't look impressed yet. And how did Green Tech miss this approach? They have hundreds of engineers working on the same problem. Because they're optimizing existing technology, I explained, gaining confidence. Incremental improvements to maintain their margin. I started from scratch, questioning every assumption in the current model. He picked up the prototype, turning it over in his hands. And your family business background? Sophia mentioned you come from engineers. I hesitated. My family thinks I'm delusional for leaving green tech. They've made it clear I shouldn't come running back when this fails. Noah set down the prototype and studied me for a long moment. The best entrepreneurs I've funded were all called crazy at some point, usually by the people closest to them. He pushed a contract across the desk. Let's see just how delusional you are, Ms. Chen. $3 million in seed funding. We'll need to scale production immediately. Walking out of that building, contract signed, I felt like I was floating. $3 million to turn my delusion into reality. I called Jackson immediately, then Sophia. I didn't call my family. Not yet. Something inside me wanted more than funding before facing them again. I wanted incontrovertible success. The next year passed in a blur. With Noah's funding, I leased a small manufacturing space and made my first critical hires. Maya Patel, a brilliant electrical engineer I'd tried to recruit to Green Tech without success, became our technical director. She brought with her two colleagues who were equally frustrated with the incremental pace of innovation at established companies. Corporate R&D is where good ideas go to die, Maya told me over late-night takeout as we prepared for our first production run. They talk about disruption while doing everything possible to prevent it. Our team grew to 15, then 30. The first production units exceeded expectations, and early customer feedback was glowing. Local news in Seattle ran a small feature on the homegrown startup revolutionizing residential solar. I sent the link to my parents with no comment. Attached. My father replied with a single line. Glad things are going well. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was something. Then came the industry convention in San Francisco. EcoNova secured a small booth, nothing fancy, but positioned fortuitously across from GreenTech's massive, gleaming installation. I stood there in my company polo shirt, watching as curious visitors trickled over after being disappointed by GreenTech's latest offering, which was essentially last year's model with marginally better performance and the same prohibitive price tag. Alexandra? I turned to find Marcus staring at me, wearing a Green Tech executive badge. His eyes darted between me and our booth display, which showcased our efficiency metrics compared to the industry standard, specifically compared to Green Tech's flagship product. Hello, Marcus, I said, suddenly very aware of how far I'd come from that dinner table in Portland. Surprised to see me? I heard rumors someone was undercutting us with new storage technology. His voice was tight. Didn't realize it was my little sister's project. Before I could respond, a crowd gathered around our booth as Maya began a demonstration. The small solar array we'd set up captured energy from the convention hall's lighting, storing it in our unit with visibly climbing efficiency metrics displayed on a large screen. We're taking orders now, I told him with a calm I didn't entirely feel. First production run sold out in 2 weeks. Second run is scaling up now. Marcus's face flickered between disbelief and something else. Concern? This isn't sustainable, Alex. You can't compete long-term with companies like Green Tech. We'll adapt, innovate. 3 years, I interrupted. That's how long I tried to get Green Tech to consider this approach when I worked there. Your R&D director called it unnecessarily experimental and focused on incremental improvements to existing technology instead. A potential customer approached, and I turned away from my brother to explain our product's advantages. When I looked back, Marcus was gone, but I spotted him across the convention floor, speaking urgently into his phone while staring in our direction. That evening, Noah hosted a dinner for several promising startups he'd funded. Halfway through the meal, he leaned over to me. Just heard something interesting through the grapevine, he said quietly. Green Tech is scrambling. Your brother apparently told their executive team they've been leapfrogged by a significant margin. They're calling an emergency R&D meeting for tomorrow morning. I took a sip of wine to hide my smile. Sounds stressful for them. Indeed. Noah raised his glass subtly. to being delusional in all the right ways. The convention marked a turning point. Orders flooded in faster than our small facility could fulfill them. Reviews praised not just our technology, but our mission to make renewable energy accessible. NOAA connected us with larger investors, and 6 months later, we moved into a renovated warehouse in Seattle's industrial district, triple the size of our original space. The company grew to over 100 employees. Local politicians began citing EcoNova as an example of green innovation creating jobs. Industry publications featured our technology in cover stories. Through it all, contact with my family remained minimal. Occasional text messages, obligatory holiday calls that carefully avoided discussing my business success. Until the day Marcus called. "Green tech is downsizing," he said without preamble. When I answered, "They're cutting the entire division working on residential solar storage." I paused before responding, letting the weight of that sink in. "I'm sorry to hear that. Will you be affected?" I asked, though I already suspected. The answer, a long silence. "They're letting me go, along with my entire team." The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus, who had called my vision delusional, was now being laid off because that vision had disrupted the market his company had failed to adapt to. "Alex," he continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "your company. I've been following your progress. What you've accomplished is remarkable. I was wondering if..." And there it was. The question I'd sometimes imagined but never truly expected to hear. "Are there any positions at EcoNova that might suit my experience?" I glanced out my office window at the bustling production floor below, where dozens of employees were building. The technology my own brother had dismissed as fantasy. "Email me your resume, Marcus," I said finally. "We're always looking for talented people." After ending the call, I sat motionless, absorbing the moment. 5 years ago, I'd driven away from my parents' house with their skepticism ringing in my ears. 5 years of doubt, struggle, breakthrough, and vindication. And now, the tables had completely turned. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I saw EcoNova featured in the Times business section. Very impressive. We should have dinner when you're next in Portland." I smiled to myself. They still didn't quite get it. After all this time, they still saw my success as some happy accident rather than the result of vision and determination. But that was okay. I no longer needed their validation. I had built something that spoke for itself. The reply from Marcus came an hour later, a perfectly formatted resume attached to an email filled with corporate buzzwords about synergy and innovation. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, was a personal note. "I was wrong about your idea, Alex. I should have supported you from the beginning." I forwarded the resume to Maya, who now headed our engineering department, with a simple question: "Worth interviewing?" Her response came quickly. "Solid experience, but is he ready to work for his younger sister?" That was the real question, wasn't it? Was Marcus, was my entire family, ready to accept that my delusion had become reality? That the path they'd dismissed had led to greater success than their safe, conventional choices? As I drafted my reply to Marcus, I thought about that rainy drive back to Seattle years ago, doubt creeping in with every mile. I thought about the garage workshop, the late nights, the prototypes that failed before we found success. I thought about every person who believed in me when my own family wouldn't. "HR will contact you to schedule an interview," I wrote. "Just to be clear, EcoNova evaluates all candidates on merit alone. Family connections guarantee nothing." I hit send, then opened my calendar to schedule a trip to Portland. It was time for a long overdue dinner with my parents, this time on my terms. The morning Marcus started at EcoNova arrived with Seattle's signature misty rain. I stood at my office window, watching employees hurry into the building, umbrellas bobbing like colorful mushrooms in the gray landscape. Somewhere among them was my brother, reporting for his first day as a project manager for our expansion. I'd deliberately scheduled an off-site meeting with potential commercial clients to avoid any awkwardness. This was his opportunity to establish himself with the team without my shadow looming over him. Maya had promised to text me updates throughout the day, not detailed reports, just enough to know if the integration was proceeding smoothly. By mid-morning, my phone remained silent. I chose to interpret this as good news. Maya would certainly have alerted me to problems. The client meeting went exceptionally well. Pacific Northwest Hospital Group was looking to retrofit their facilities with renewable energy systems, and our storage technology would make the conversion both practical and cost-effective. Their sustainability director, an energetic woman named Fiona Watts, had been tracking EcoNova's development for months. "Your residential systems have transformed the market," she said as we toured their flagship hospital. "If you can scale that same efficiency for commercial applications, you'll revolutionize institutional energy consumption." It was exactly the kind of opportunity we needed as we expanded beyond residential systems. The hospital group operated 12 facilities across 3 states, a perfect showcase for our commercial technology. "Our team is finalizing the commercial-scale prototypes now," I explained. "The core technology is the same, just adapted for larger capacity and different integration requirements. We could start with a pilot installation here at the main facility, then expand to the others once we've demonstrated the performance metrics." Fiona nodded enthusiastically. "I'd need solid ROI projections to present to the board. They're committed to sustainability, but the numbers need to make sense." "Of course. I'll have our team prepare comprehensive projections including maintenance, costs, efficiency comparisons, and expected lifespan. The initial investment is higher than conventional systems, but the long-term savings are substantial." By the time we concluded the meeting, we had a framework for a potential multi-million-dollar contract, contingent on our commercial prototype performing as promised and financial projections meeting their parameters. It was the kind of opportunity that could establish EcoNova as a serious player in the commercial sector. As I drove back to the office, my phone finally buzzed with a text from Maya. "Smooth sailing. Your brother knows his stuff." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. Whatever personal history existed between Marcus and me, it appeared he was taking this professional opportunity seriously. When I arrived back at the office, I deliberately avoided checking in on Marcus directly. Instead, I sought out our operations director, Tara Wu, who would be his direct supervisor. "First impressions?" I asked casually, leaning against the doorframe of her office. Tara looked up from her computer with a thoughtful expression. "He's thorough, asked smart questions about our current processes, identified some potential bottlenecks in the expansion plan that we hadn't considered." She paused. "And he's very careful to mention that he's here to learn our way of doing things, not import green tech practices." Almost apologetically so. I nodded, digesting this information. "Good. Keep me posted on any issues, but treat him like any other team member." "Already am," Tara assured me. "Though I have to say, the resemblance between you two is uncanny. Same analytical stare." I smiled despite myself. Chen family trademark. As I headed to my office, I passed the conference room where the expansion planning team was working. Through the glass, I could see Marcus standing at a whiteboard, mapping out production flow diagrams while team members offered input. He looked focused, engaged, completely in his element. For a moment, I glimpsed the brother I'd admired growing up, before competition and corporate politics had driven a wedge between us. I continued to my office without interrupting them. This was his project now, and he needed space to establish his own relationships within the company. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The South Seattle facility renovation began, with construction crews working around the clock to transform the cavernous warehouse into a state-of-the-art manufacturing plant. The commercial prototype exceeded performance expectations in initial tests, and I scheduled a follow-up meeting with Pacific Northwest Hospital Group to present detailed projections. Marcus settled into his role with unexpected humility and diligence. We maintained a strictly professional relationship at work, nodding politely when passing in hallways, exchanging necessary information in group meetings, but never seeking private conversations. The unspoken tension between us gradually softened into something more like mutual respect. 3 weeks after he started, Maya dropped into my office late one evening, finding me surrounded by financial projections for the hospital contract. "You need to see this," she said, placing a tablet on my desk. It displayed a completely redesigned production layout for the new facility, one that would increase efficiency by nearly 20% over our original plans. I studied the diagram, impressed by its elegance. "Who came up with this?" "Your brother." Maya sat in the chair across from me. "He's been working on it for the past 2 weeks, mostly after hours. Tara says he consulted with every department, engineering, quality control, shipping, to identify friction points in our current system and design them out of the new facility. I examined the details more closely. The layout incorporated innovative touches I recognized from my own design philosophy, prioritizing adaptability, minimizing wasted movement, creating natural workflow patterns. But it also included elements I would never have considered, drawing from Marcus's experience with larger-scale operations. "It's good," I admitted. "Really good." Maya nodded. "Tara's team is unanimously in favor of adopting it." I told her, "I'd run it by you first." I handed the tablet back to her. "Tell them to proceed, and—" I hesitated, then added, "Let Marcus know his work is appreciated." That night, driving home, I found myself reflecting on the strange turn our family dynamics had taken. Marcus, who had once dismissed my vision, was now helping to build it. My parents, who had warned me against entrepreneurial risk, were now proudly following Econova's every development. And I, who had fought so hard for independence from my family's expectations, now found them integrated into my professional life, in ways I never anticipated. The following morning, I arrived early to find Marcus already in the office, reviewing material specifications for the new facility. He looked up, surprised to see me in the doorway of the conference room. "Alex, I mean Dr. Chen," he corrected himself awkwardly. "Alex is fine," I said, entering the room. "At least when it's just us." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "I figured you'd want to maintain professionalism." "We can be professional and still acknowledge we're siblings." I gestured to the tablet in front of him. "Maya showed me your redesign for the production floor. It's excellent work." His expression brightened. "Thanks. I tried to incorporate the core values I've observed here while addressing some of the scaling challenges." I took a seat across from him. This is the part where normally I'd joke that you finally see the value in my delusional ideas. A flush of embarrassment colored his face. "I deserve that." "Maybe, but we're moving forward, not backward." I tapped the table thoughtfully. "Tell me more about your thinking on these workflow innovations." For the next half hour, we had our first genuine professional conversation as colleagues rather than competitors. Marcus explained his approach to scaling production while maintaining the quality controls that had made our residential systems so reliable. I shared insights about our technical roadmap and how the facility design needed to accommodate future innovations. We disagreed on several points, but the debate was constructive rather than combative. As the discussion wound down, Marcus hesitated, then said quietly, "I was wrong about you, Alex. About all of this. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." The directness of his apology caught me off guard. I'd expected professional competence from him, perhaps grudging respect, but not this level of personal accountability. "What changed your mind?" I asked. "Besides GreenTech's collapse, I mean." He considered the question seriously. It started before that, actually, when your first production models hit the market and the reviews were so positive. I remember reading customer testimonials about how your systems had made renewable energy affordable for average homeowners, and realizing that was exactly what you'd promised to do, what I'd dismissed as impossible. He shook his head. Green Tech's leadership was still talking about how you'd cut corners, how your approach wouldn't scale, how the technology would prove unreliable, but the evidence kept mounting that you'd cracked a code we couldn't. I nodded, appreciating his honesty. And now that you're here, inside the company I built, now I understand why you left, he said simply. You couldn't have created this within Green Tech's constraints. The innovation culture here, the way ideas flow from anyone regardless of title, the rapid prototyping, the willingness to question assumptions, it's unlike anything I've experienced. The conversation was interrupted as employees began arriving for the day. We both stood, shifting back into our professional personas. But something had changed between us. A first step toward healing a rift that had seemed unbridgeable. The Pacific Northwest Hospital Group meeting is tomorrow, I said. As we walked toward the door, I'd like you to join the presentation team. Your facility design is a key part of our capacity to fulfill commercial contracts. Surprise registered on his face. Of course, I'd be honored. As we parted ways, I felt a strange lightness. Perhaps Maya had been right when she'd echoed my own words back to me. People can change when forced to by circumstances. Marcus had been forced to confront his miscalculation about my business vision. I had been forced to reconsider my assumptions about his ability to evolve. Both of us were finding our way toward a new understanding. The hospital group presentation the next day exceeded even my optimistic expectations. Our team delivered a compelling case for Econova's commercial systems, with detailed projections showing a 4-year return on investment and substantial savings thereafter. Marcus's contribution, explaining how our expanded production facility would ensure timely delivery and consistent quality, was particularly effective, drawing on his years of experience managing large-scale operations. Fiona and her team asked probing questions about system integration, maintenance requirements, and performance guarantees. We had anticipated most of their concerns and provided thorough responses, but one technical question about integration with their existing backup generators momentarily stumped our team. To my surprise, Marcus stepped in seamlessly. That's actually an issue we encountered at Green Tech when implementing similar systems. The solution involves a custom interface module that prevents feedback loops during power transitions. He sketched a quick diagram on the tablet, projecting it onto the main screen. We can adapt this approach for your specific infrastructure. It adds approximately 3% to the installation cost, but eliminates the compatibility problems entirely. The hospital's technical director leaned forward, clearly impressed. That's exactly the issue we've encountered with other renewable systems. If you can solve that integration problem, it removes a major obstacle for us. After the presentation, as we walked the hospital team to the elevator, Fiona pulled me aside. Your brother is a valuable addition to your team, she said quietly. His practical experience complements your innovative approach perfectly. It's rare to find that balance. I nodded, acknowledging the truth of her observation. We bring different perspectives. Well, it works. My recommendation to the board will be to proceed with the pilot installation. Assuming that performs, as promised, we'll look at implementing across all our facilities within 2 years. It was a watershed moment for Econova, our first major commercial contract, opening doors to an entirely new market segment. As our team returned to the office, the excitement was palpable. This wasn't just a business victory. It was validation of our approach on an institutional scale. In the conference room, as we debriefed the meeting, I made a point of acknowledging Marcus's contribution. The technical solution you proposed for the generator integration was exactly what they needed to hear. Well done. He accepted the praise with a nod, but I could see it meant something to him. Professional recognition from the company founder who happened to be his once-dismissed sister. Later that afternoon, Noah called to check in on the presentation. When I told him about the likely contract, his enthusiasm bubbled through the phone. "This is exactly the kind of showcase client we need," he said. "Hospitals are high-profile, high-credibility institutions. If they trust EcoNova technology, other commercial clients will follow." "It's a significant step," I agreed, and the team performed brilliantly, including Marcus. There was a brief pause. "How's that working out? Having your brother on staff?" "Better than expected," I admitted. "He brings valuable experience, and he's fully committed to our approach now that he's seen it from the inside." "People are often more complex than our history with them suggests," Noah observed. "I've seen it repeatedly in business. Former competitors becoming allies, skeptics becoming evangelists. The key is whether they can genuinely evolve beyond their initial position." His words resonated with my own recent reflections. I think he has, but the real test will be the facility launch. That's his project to deliver. "Speaking of which," Noah said, changing topics, "the latest construction update looks promising, on budget and only slightly behind schedule. When do you anticipate beginning production there?" 4 months if everything continues as planned. Just in time to fulfill the hospital contract along with our expanded residential orders. After ending the call, I walked to the large windows overlooking the production floor of our current facility. Teams of skilled technicians assembled our residential storage systems with practiced precision, a process I had personally designed in those early days working from my garage. Soon we would be replicating and scaling this operation in a space 4 times larger, producing both residential and commercial systems. The journey from concept to reality still sometimes felt surreal. Every milestone, from the first working prototype to this watershed commercial contract, represented a point where my delusion had proven itself in the real world. And now, even those who had most vehemently dismissed my vision were contributing to its fulfillment. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from my father. The subject line simply read, "Proud." The message itself was brief, characteristically understated. "Alexandra, your mother and I saw the announcement about EcoNova's potential contract with Pacific Northwest Hospital Group. Transforming institutional energy consumption is no small achievement. You've taken your vision further than perhaps even you imagined. Well done." It was the kind of validation I had once desperately craved. Now, it was welcome, but no longer necessary. A pleasant addition to the internal certainty I had developed through years of proving my concept despite doubters. I replied with a simple thank you, adding that Marcus had been instrumental in securing the contract. It felt important somehow to acknowledge his contribution, to show that I could rise above our complicated history. My father's response came quickly. "Not surprised. You both inherited the Chen analytical mind. Different applications, perhaps, but the same fundamental approach to problem solving. Together, quite formidable." It was as close as my father would ever come to saying he'd been wrong to pit us against each other, to value Marcus's corporate climb over my entrepreneurial vision. I saved the email, touched by the sentiment behind his typically reserved words. The weeks that followed brought intensified activity as we prepared for both the hospital pilot installation and the new facility launch. I found myself working closely with Marcus on numerous aspects of the expansion, our professional relationship gradually evolving into something resembling our childhood rapport, challenging each other's thinking, building on each other's ideas, combining our distinct perspectives to create stronger solutions. One evening, as we reviewed equipment installation timelines for the new facility, Marcus paused mid-sentence and shook his head with a bemused expression. "What?" I asked, looking up from the scheduling conflicts I'd been flagging. "Just thinking," About how different this is from what I expected, he said. When I applied to EcoNova, I thought I'd be starting over at the bottom, proving myself to people who resented me because of our history. Instead, he gestured at the collaborative project plans spread across the table. Instead, you're helping shape the company's future, I finished, because you earned it through your work, not your last name. He nodded. I underestimated you for years, Alex. We all did, but I think I underestimated myself too, in a different way. At GreenTech, I'd become so entrenched in their approach that I stopped seeing alternatives. Being here, starting fresh, questioning assumptions, it's liberating. It was perhaps the most personal conversation we'd had since he joined EcoNova. I considered my response carefully. Innovation requires a certain comfort with uncertainty, I said, with the possibility of being wrong. That's what GreenTech lost, the willingness to question their own success formula, even as the market evolved around them. Marcus absorbed this, then asked the question that had perhaps been lingering since his first day. Why did you agree to hire me? After everything? The answer came more easily than I expected. Because talent and experience shouldn't be wasted on grudges. You have valuable skills. EcoNova needs those skills to grow. The company's mission matters more than our personal history. Simple as that? I shrugged. Maybe not quite that simple, but simple enough to build a working relationship on. As we returned to the scheduling issues, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The brother who had once dismissed my business vision was now helping execute it. The parents who had questioned my judgment were now celebrating my success. And I, who had once defined myself in opposition to my family's expectations, was finding ways to integrate them into my life on new terms. My terms. The pilot installation at Pacific Northwest Hospital proceeded on schedule, despite the technical complexities of integrating with their existing systems. Marcus took personal responsibility for the generator interface solution he had proposed, working closely with our engineering team and the hospital's facilities staff to ensure flawless implementation. On the day the system went live, Fiona invited our entire project team to the hospital for an official switch-flipping ceremony. As the hospital's CEO gave a brief speech about their commitment to sustainable practices, I glanced at my team, Maya, who had been with me since those early garage days, Jackson, whose initial investment had kept us afloat when no one else believed, and Marcus, whose journey from skeptic to advocate embodied the transformation we hoped to create in the wider energy market. When the system activated successfully, transitioning the hospital to predominantly renewable energy with our storage technology managing the flow, the gathered hospital staff applauded enthusiastically. For them, it represented cost savings and environmental responsibility. For EcoNova, it represented validation on an institutional scale. This is just the beginning, Fiona told me as we toured the installation afterward. Our board has already approved implementation at our Portland facility based on the performance metrics here. And we're talking with 3 other hospital groups about our experience. Word of the successful installation spread quickly through industry channels. Within weeks, inquiries about commercial applications doubled, then tripled. EcoNova had broken through a critical barrier, proving our technology could scale from residential to institutional use without sacrificing efficiency or reliability. The timing aligned perfectly with the completion of our new production facility. Marcus had delivered the project on schedule and under budget, with numerous improvements to the original design implemented along the way. The expanded capacity would allow us to fulfill both our growing residential orders and the new commercial contracts now flowing in. The day before the official opening of the South Seattle facility, I invited the entire company, now nearly 200 employees, for a preview tour. Leading them through the cavernous space, I explained how the innovative layout would streamline production, increase quality control, and allow for future expansion. Without explicitly saying so, I made sure everyone understood that Marcus had spearheaded these improvements. As the tour concluded, I gathered everyone in the main assembly area for an impromptu address. 4 years ago, Econova existed only as an idea, a vision that many people dismissed as impractical, unrealistic, even delusional. I smiled at the knowing chuckles from those who had heard the company origin story. Today, we stand in this facility that will more than quadruple our production capacity. Our technology is transforming not just homes, but institutions. What was once dismissed is now changing how the world thinks about renewable energy storage. I looked around at the faces of my team, some who had been with me from the earliest days, others who had joined as we grew, all united by belief in our mission. Success isn't just about being proven right, I continued. It's about creating something meaningful, something that makes a tangible difference. Everyone in this room has contributed to building that reality, regardless of when or how you joined us. My gaze found Marcus, standing quietly at the back of the group. Our eyes met briefly, acknowledgement of how far we had both come from that rainy night in Portland when my family had dismissed my dreams. Tomorrow, we officially open this facility and begin a new chapter for Econova. But today, I want to thank each of you for making the impossible possible, for turning a garage experiment into an industry-changing company, for believing in a vision worth pursuing, regardless of the skeptics. The spontaneous applause that followed wasn't just for me. It was for all of us, for what we had built together. As the teams broke into smaller groups to explore different areas of the facility, I found myself standing alone for a moment, taking in the magnitude of what we had accomplished. Maya appeared at my side, a knowing smile on her face. "Not bad. For a delusional dream, huh?" I laughed. "Not bad at all." "So," she said, nodding toward Marcus, who was explaining a technical feature to a group of engineers. "Hiring your brother worked out." "Seems that way. He found his place here." "People surprise you sometimes," she observed, "when given the chance to reinvent themselves." I thought about how much had changed, not just for Marcus, but for my parents, for myself. How the dynamics that had seemed so fixed, so immutable, had transformed when confronted with new realities. "The grand opening tomorrow," Maya continued. "Your parents coming?" I nodded. "And bringing family friends." Apparently my father has been something of an Econova evangelist lately. "The ultimate conversion," she said with a laugh, "from skeptic to promoter." As employees began to file out, energized by the preview and eager for the official opening, the next day I lingered in the quiet facility. Tomorrow would bring speeches, ceremonies, local press coverage, the public face of Econova's expansion. But this moment, standing in the physical manifestation of my once dismissed vision, felt more significant somehow. Marcus approached as I was gathering my things to leave. "Everything set for tomorrow?" "All arranged," I confirmed. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished here. The facility is exceptional." He shook his head slightly. "I implemented improvements to your vision, Alex. That's all. The foundation, the thing that makes Econova special, that was always yours." The simple acknowledgement meant more than any formal apology could have. Not because I needed his validation, but because it represented the full circle of our journey, from dismissal to genuine recognition. "See you tomorrow," I said. "It's going to be a big day." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the path that had led me here. The doubt, the struggle, the moments of uncertainty when only my belief in the vision had kept me going. The family that had once dismissed my dreams was now celebrating them, even participating in their fulfillment. And tomorrow, we would open a facility that would allow us to bring affordable, renewable energy to more homes and institutions than I had initially dared to imagine. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Just heard about another hospital group inquiring after seeing the Pacific Northwest installation. This is just the beginning, Alex." I smiled. thinking of how right he was. This wasn't just a personal vindication or a family reconciliation. It was the start of something much bigger, the scaling of a solution that could genuinely impact how the world approached energy storage and consumption. The delusional dream was now an expanding reality, reaching far beyond what even I had initially envisioned. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of this journey. That vision, when combined with persistence and the right team, could transcend not just skepticism, but even the original boundaries of the dream itself. The morning of the South Seattle facility opening dawned crisp and clear, one of those rare, perfect Seattle days when the sky shimmers blue and Mount Rainier stands sentinel in the distance. I arrived early, wanting a moment of quiet before the ceremonies began. The facility gleamed in the morning light, solar panels on the roof catching the sun, the Eco-Nova logo prominent against the renovated facade. A stage had been set up near the entrance, chairs arranged in neat rows for invited guests, a podium bearing our company emblem centered and ready. This moment felt significant beyond the obvious business milestone. Standing alone in front of the building, I allowed myself to fully absorb how far we had come, not just in terms of company growth, but in the journey from dismissed idea to market-changing reality. 4 years earlier, I had driven away from my parents' house with their skepticism ringing in my ears. Today, they would stand beside me as we celebrated the expansion of the company they once considered a flight of fancy. Taking it all in? Maya's voice broke into my thoughts as she approached, clipboard in hand, her practical presence grounding as always. "Just appreciating the view," I said, gesturing to the building. "Hard to believe this started in my garage." She smiled, handing me a final copy of the day's schedule. The garage phase feels like ancient history now, though I still have the burn mark on my forearm from that exploding prototype. We both laughed, remembering the early days of trial and error, the countless failures that had preceded our breakthrough. Maya had been there through it all, believing in the vision when few others did. "Your parents just arrived," she said more quietly. "They're in the reception area with Marcus." I nodded, steeling myself for the inevitable emotions of the day. "And the press?" "Setting up. Local TV, business journals, renewable energy publications, all confirmed. Noah's bringing the investors in a separate group. They'll arrive just before the ceremony." By 9 o'clock, the area in front of the facility had transformed into a hive of activity. Employees guided guests to their seats. Caterers prepared for the reception that would follow. Photographers positioned themselves for optimal angles. Among the gathering crowd, I spotted my parents, dressed formally for the occasion. My father looking uncharacteristically nervous as he tugged at his tie. I made my way to them, weaving through well-wishers and congratulations. My mother embraced me warmly when I reached them, while my father offered a stiff but sincere handshake. "Alexandra," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "This is quite something." I followed his gaze around the impressive facility and gathered guests. "Yes, it is. We brought the Millers and the Wongs," my mother added, gesturing to family, friends hovering nearby. "Hope that's all right. They've been following Eco-Nova's progress through our updates." I recognized them as longtime family friends, people who had known me since childhood and had likely heard all about my impractical career decision when I'd first left Green Tech. Their presence today, at my parents' invitation, spoke volumes about how perspectives had shifted. "Of course," I assured her. "Everyone's welcome." Marcus joined us, looking sharp in a suit with an Eco-Nova pin on his lapel. He had fully embraced his role in the company, earning respect through his work rather than our shared last name. "Everything's ready," he reported. "Tours arranged, demonstrations prepared, technical teams briefed on key talking points for the investors." I nodded appreciatively. "Perfect. You should be front and center today, Marcus. This facility is your achievement as much as anyone's." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. followed by a grateful smile. I appreciate that. But today is about EcoNova and your vision. I'm just glad to be part of it now. Our parents watched. This exchange with something like wonder. Their children collaborating professionally after years of competition and conflict. My father cleared his throat. "You've both done remarkable work," he said, the closest he would come to acknowledging how wrong he had been about both of us. About my entrepreneurial vision and Marcus's capacity for change. Before we could continue, Noah arrived with a group of investors, all eager to see the facility that their capital had helped create. I excused myself to greet them, slipping back into my role as company founder and CEO. "Alex!" Noah called, waving me over. Perfect timing. I was just telling everyone about the hospital contract and the market expansion it represents. I joined their circle, noting the impressed expressions as they took in the scale of the new facility. These were people who had taken a chance on EcoNova based on prototypes and projections. Now they were seeing the physical manifestation of that potential. "We're positioned to quadruple production within 6 months," I explained, emphasizing the practical implications of their investment. The commercial contracts alone represent a 30% increase in revenue projections, with significantly higher profit margins than the residential systems. One investor, a shrewd venture capitalist named Patricia Ramos, who had initially been the most skeptical, nodded appreciatively. "I've been following the industry response to your hospital installation. Very impressive. 3 other healthcare systems have reached out to my firm asking about similar renewable solutions." This was exactly the market response we'd hoped. 4. Institutional clients recognizing the value proposition of our technology, not just through our marketing materials, but through peer recommendations. "We're already scaling production to meet anticipated demand," I assured her. "That's the primary function of this facility, enabling us to fulfill both residential and commercial orders without compromise on quality or delivery timelines." As we continued the conversation, I noticed local news crews setting up cameras near the stage. The publicist we'd hired for the event caught my eye, tapping her watch to indicate it was nearly time for the ceremony to begin. "If you'll excuse me," I said to the investors, "I should prepare for the opening remarks. Please enjoy the refreshments, and afterward we'll have comprehensive tours of the production floor." I made my way to a quiet corner to review my notes one final time. The speech was brief but meaningful, acknowledging the journey from concept to industry presence, thanking those who had contributed, and outlining EcoNova's vision for the future. What I had not included, what remained private despite the day's public nature, was how personal this victory felt. Not just professionally, but as vindication of a dream once dismissed by those closest to me. At precisely 10 o'clock, the ceremony began. Jackson, serving as Master of Ceremonies in his role as Chief Strategy Officer, welcomed everyone and offered context about EcoNova's mission to make renewable energy storage accessible and affordable. He then introduced Noah, who spoke briefly about the investment community's growing recognition of green technology's market potential. "When I first met Alexandra Chen," Noah said, his voice carrying across the attentive crowd, "she showed me a prototype that defied conventional industry wisdom. Experts had claimed that affordable, efficient residential energy storage was years away from feasibility. She had built it in her garage." He paused as appreciative laughter rippled through the audience. Today, that garage experiment has evolved into the technology powering homes across the region and, increasingly, institutions that recognize both the environmental and economic advantages of truly accessible renewable energy. He gestured toward me, seated on stage. Great companies begin with vision, the ability to see possibilities where others see only constraints. EcoNova exemplifies that principle, and I'm proud to have supported its growth from concept to market leader. As applause followed his remarks, I took a deep breath, preparing to address the gathering. Jackson returned to the podium to introduce me, his friendship evident in the warmth of his words. It's my honor to introduce EcoNova's founder and CEO, Dr. Alexandra Chen, he concluded, stepping aside as I approached the podium. Looking out at the assembled guests, employees who had built the company alongside me, investors who had backed our vision, family members who had journeyed from skepticism to support, media representatives who would share our story beyond these walls. I felt a momentary surge of emotion that threatened my composure. I gripped the podium slightly, centering myself. Thank you all for joining us today as we celebrate not just a new facility, but a milestone in EcoNova's mission to transform how we think about energy storage and accessibility. I began, my voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. 4 years ago, EcoNova existed only as a concept, a belief that renewable energy could and should be accessible to average households and institutions, not just early adopters with substantial resources. I glanced briefly toward my parents, seated in the front row. My father watched intently while my mother dabbed discreetly at her eyes. Conventional wisdom said it couldn't be done, that efficient, affordable energy storage required technological breakthroughs that were still years away. But at EcoNova, we questioned those assumptions. We approached the challenge from a different angle. We reimagined what was possible. As I continued, outlining our journey from prototype to production, I emphasized the collaborative nature of our success, the engineers who had refined the technology, the production team that had scaled manufacturing, the early customers who had taken a chance on an unproven system. This facility represents the next phase of that journey, I said, gesturing to the building behind me. Here, we will produce both our residential systems and our new commercial-scale technology, recently implemented at Pacific Northwest Hospital Group's main campus. The expanded capacity will allow us to meet growing demand while continuing to innovate, to push boundaries, to question assumptions about what's possible in renewable energy. I acknowledged key contributors by name. Maya for her technical leadership, Jackson for his strategic vision, Noah for his early belief in our potential. And then, in a decision I had made only that morning, I recognized Marcus. I'd also like to acknowledge Marcus Chen, our project manager for this facility expansion. His expertise in scaling operations, his attention to production efficiency, and his commitment to our mission have been invaluable in bringing this project to successful completion, on time and under budget. Surprise flickered across Marcus's face, followed by genuine appreciation as applause acknowledged his contribution. Our parents exchanged glances, visibly moved by this public recognition of their son by their daughter, a healing of the rift they had inadvertently helped create. In closing, I continued, I want to share a thought about innovation and vision. Often, the most transformative ideas are initially dismissed as unrealistic or impractical. Conventional wisdom, by definition, reflects what has been done before, not what might be possible. At EcoNova, we believe in questioning that conventional wisdom, in seeing constraints as challenges rather than limitations, in pursuing solutions that others might consider unlikely or even delusional. I paused, allowing the word to resonate. Many in the audience knew my personal history, how my family had once used that very term to describe my entrepreneurial ambitions. Today, as we open this facility, we're not just celebrating EcoNova's growth or our expanding market presence. We're celebrating the power of vision, the ability to see potential where others see only obstacles. That's the spirit that built this company, and it's the spirit that will continue to drive us forward as we work to make renewable energy truly accessible for all. The applause that followed felt like affirmation not just of my words, but of the journey itself, from dismissed dream to demonstrated reality. As I stepped away from the podium, Noah approached to shake my hand, followed by investors and industry partners eager to offer congratulations. Throughout the reception that followed, as guests enjoyed refreshments and waited for facility tours to begin, I moved among the clusters of conversation, answering questions about our technology and future plans. Journalists pulled me aside for brief interviews, focusing particularly on the hospital implementation and what it meant for institutional adoption of renewable energy. Amidst the professional networking, I caught glimpses of my family, my mother proudly explaining Econova's mission to their friends, my father engaged in serious discussion with Noah about future investment possibilities, Marcus guiding small groups through technical explanations of our production process. They had found their places within this world I had created, roles that respected both my leadership and their own evolving perspectives. As the formal ceremony transitioned to facility tours, I found myself momentarily alone near the refreshment table. Patricia Ramos, the once skeptical investor, approached with a thoughtful expression. "Remarkable achievement, Alexandra," she said, gesturing around us. "But I suspect the most remarkable part isn't visible in this building or even in your technology." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" "I've been watching your family today," she said with the directness of someone accustomed to observing human dynamics. "I've been in venture capital long enough to recognize the signs of a founder who's proven skeptics wrong. There's a particular satisfaction in that kind of validation." Her perception was uncomfortably accurate. I sipped my water, considering how to respond. "Family relationships are complicated," I said finally, "especially when they intersect with professional ambitions." She nodded. "I've backed dozens of founders over the years. The ones who succeed despite initial dismissal from those closest to them, they share a certain quality, a resilience that goes beyond ordinary determination. They don't just want to succeed, they need to succeed, to validate something fundamental about themselves." The insight struck closer to home than I cared to admit. Had my drive been fueled, not just by belief in my technology, but by the need to prove my family wrong? Had their dismissal actually strengthened my resolve, forced me to be more meticulous, more innovative, more resilient than I might otherwise have been? Perhaps, I acknowledged. Though proving others wrong is a limited source of motivation. Building something meaningful, something that genuinely improves people's lives, that sustains you through the truly difficult moments. She smiled, appreciating the subtle correction. "Well said. And you've certainly built something meaningful here, which is why my firm is interested in discussing your next funding round. Your expansion into commercial applications opens significant new market potential." The conversation shifted to business strategy, but her observation lingered in my thoughts throughout the remainder of the event. As the formal program concluded and guests gradually departed, I found myself reflecting on the complex interplay between personal validation and professional achievement that had marked Econova's journey. My parents approached as I was saying goodbye to the last group of investors. My father looked more relaxed now that the formal ceremonies were complete. His tie slightly loosened, his expression thoughtful. "Your speech was excellent," he said, offering what from him constituted effusive praise. "Especially what you said about questioning conventional wisdom." My mother squeezed my arm gently. "We're so proud of you, Alexandra. What you've built. Here, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." The simple acknowledgement touched me more deeply than I had anticipated. Not because I still needed their approval, but because their journey from skepticism to genuine understanding mirrored a broader shift I hoped to create in the energy market, from doubt about renewable practicality to recognition of its transformative potential. "Thank you for coming," I said. "It meant a lot to have you here today." "We wouldn't have missed it," my mother assured me. "Though I admit, when you first told us about leaving Green Tech, we never envisioned anything like this." My father nodded, uncharacteristically reflective. "I spent my career working within established systems, believing that was the path to security and success. I wanted the same for you and Marcus, but you saw possibilities I couldn't see, not because they weren't there, but because I wasn't looking for them." It was perhaps the most honest acknowledgement he had ever offered of the limitations in his own perspective. I recognized what it cost him. This man who had built his identity on being right, on making prudent choices, on understanding how the world worked, to admit he had fundamentally misunderstood what was possible. Different generations, different approaches, I said, offering him a graceful framing for his miscalculation. You taught me to value engineering excellence and analytical thinking. I just applied those principles in a context you hadn't considered. He seemed grateful for this interpretation. Perhaps, but I should have had more faith in your judgment, even when it differed from my own. That's my regret. As we walked together toward the parking area, my mother mentioned they had dinner reservations at a restaurant near their hotel and invited me to join them. In the past, I might have declined, using work as a convenient buffer against the lingering awkwardness in our relationship. But today, in the wake of the facility opening and my father's unexpected candor, I found myself accepting. I'd like that, I said. Let me just check in with the team about a few final details, and I'll meet you there. As they headed to their car, I returned briefly to the facility where Maya, Jackson, and Marcus were overseeing the final departure of guests and media. The four of us stood together in the entrance hall, a moment of shared satisfaction at how smoothly the event had unfolded. Quite a day, Jackson remarked. From garage startup to this in 4 years. Not bad, Dr. Chen. Maya nudged my shoulder, gently. The investors were practically falling over themselves to discuss the next round. Patricia Ramos cornered me for 20 minutes asking about our R&D pipeline. I noticed, I said with a smile. She mentioned their interest in participating in our Series C. Marcus, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. The media coverage was excellent too. All the local stations ran live segments, and the business reporter from the Seattle Times wants to do a feature story on the commercial applications and the hospital partnership. I nodded appreciatively. Perfect. That's exactly the narrative. We want to establish EcoNova as a serious player in both residential and commercial markets. Looking at these three people who had been instrumental in building the company, Maya with her technical brilliance, Jackson with his early belief and strategic insight, and now Marcus with his operational expertise, I felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, I said simply. All of you. Today wouldn't have been possible without each of you. They accepted this acknowledgement with the comfortable confidence of people who knew their value, who understood their contributions to our shared success. Speaking of today, I continued, I'm having dinner with my parents this evening. They invited me to join them at Luciano's. Maya raised her eyebrows slightly, aware of how rarely I accepted such invitations in the past. That's nice. Family celebration. Something like that, I agreed. They seem different today, more accepting, especially my father. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. He's been different with me too since I joined EcoNova. Less judgmental, more curious. I think seeing the company's success from the inside has changed his perspective. Success has a way of shifting perspectives, Jackson observed wryly. Suddenly, the impractical becomes visionary, and the risky becomes boldly innovative. We all laughed, recognizing the truth in his observation. The world was full of retroactive supporters, people who claimed to have always believed once success was evident. But there was something different, something more meaningful, about my family's evolution. They had acknowledged their miscalculation directly. They had found ways to contribute to what I was building rather than simply celebrating from a distance. Anyway, I said, checking the time, I should go. Final walkthrough of the facility tomorrow morning? Already scheduled, Marcus confirmed. 9 a.m. with the operations team to ensure everything's ready for the first production run on Monday. I left them finalizing details and drove to the restaurant, my mind still processing the events of the day. The facility opening represented more than a business milestone. It marked a turning point in how I understood my own journey, not just as a founder vindicated, but as someone whose vision had expanded beyond personal validation to genuine market transformation. The restaurant was softly lit and elegant, the kind of place my parents appreciated with its traditional decor and formal service. They were already seated when I arrived, my father having ordered a bottle of champagne to mark the occasion. "To Eco Nova," he said, raising his glass once mine was filled. "And to Alexandra, whose vision made it possible." We clinked glasses, the simple toast acknowledging what had once seemed impossible. My father not just accepting, but celebrating the path I had chosen against his advice. As we enjoyed the meal, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. My parents asked thoughtful questions about the company's future plans, sharing their own observations about the renewable energy market based on news they had followed since becoming Eco Nova attentive. My father even offered some insights about potential manufacturing efficiencies based on his years at Boeing, not as directives, but as suggestions offered with newfound respect for my expertise. "Marcus seems to have found his place at Eco Nova," my mother observed during dessert. "I've never seen him so engaged, so purposeful." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "He's doing excellent work. The facility design incorporates several of his innovations that will significantly improve production efficiency." "It can't have been an easy decision," my father said carefully, "hiring him after everything." "It wasn't," I acknowledged. "But I try to make business decisions based on merit, not personal history." Marcus brings valuable experience and perspective. The company benefits from his contributions, just as it benefits from Maya's technical expertise or Jackson's strategic vision. My father seemed to appreciate this framing, the professional assessment separated from emotional complications. Still, it shows character. To offer opportunity to someone who once dismissed your ideas so thoroughly. "Or practical business sense," I countered with a small smile. "Talent shouldn't be wasted on grudges, especially when that talent can help build something meaningful." As the evening concluded and we prepared to leave, my mother embraced me, warmly. "We're staying through the weekend," she mentioned. "Perhaps brunch on Sunday before we head back to Portland." In the past, I might have invented a work commitment to maintain emotional distance. Tonight, I found myself agreeing easily. "I'd like that. Text me details and I'll be there." My father shook my hand, then, in an uncharacteristic gesture, pulled me into a brief but sincere hug. "What you said today about seeing possibilities where others see only constraints, that will stay with me. It's a perspective I wish I'd embraced earlier in my career, in my life." Driving home through the quiet Seattle streets, I reflected on the day's significance. The public celebration of Eco Nova's expansion, yes, but also the more private healing of family wounds that had seemed at one time irreconcilable. Success had created the opportunity for reconciliation, but it was mutual recognition, mutual respect that had made it meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Exceptional event today. Investors thoroughly impressed. Calls already. Coming in about participation in Series C. This is just the beginning, Alex." I smiled at his characteristic focus on the business implications, which were indeed substantial. The facility opening had positioned Eco Nova for accelerated growth, expanded market presence, increased investment interest. But beneath these tangible outcomes lay something less measurable but equally significant: the alignment of personal and professional fulfillment that had once seemed impossible. When I had first shared my vision with my family, their dismissal had created a painful choice: pursue my dream at the cost of their approval, or abandon my insights to maintain harmony. I had chosen the dream, accepting the relational cost as necessary. What I hadn't anticipated was the possibility of eventual reconciliation, of my family not just acknowledging my success, but genuinely understanding the vision that had driven it. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the evening edition of the Seattle Business Journal on my porch, delivered early with a sticky note from my assistant. thought you'd want to see this right away. The front page featured a photo of the EcoNova facility opening, with the headline, "Local Startup Expands, Poised to Transform Commercial Energy Market." The article described EcoNova's journey from innovative concept to market disruptor, highlighting the Pacific Northwest Hospital implementation as evidence of institutional adoption. It quoted NOAA on the investment community's growing recognition of renewable storage as a critical market sector, and included a brief statement from me about our mission to make sustainable energy accessible to all. What caught my attention, however, was the final paragraph. Industry analysts once dismissed affordable, efficient energy storage as years away from practical implementation. Chen's persistence in questioning these assumptions has not only built a thriving company, but potentially accelerated the timeline for widespread renewable energy adoption by half a decade or more. I set the paper aside, struck by how thoroughly external perceptions had shifted. What had once been labeled delusional was now recognized as visionary. What had been dismissed as impractical was now celebrated as innovative. The validation felt satisfying, but no longer necessary, a confirmation of what I already knew rather than proof I still needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, scaling production at the new facility, managing expanding commercial contracts, preparing for the next investment round. But tonight, I allowed myself to fully appreciate the journey that had brought me here. From that rainy night drive back to Seattle after my family's dismissal, to today's celebration of what that dismissed vision had become. The real victory wasn't proving skeptics wrong. It was creating something meaningful enough that even the skeptics eventually recognized its value. Not because I needed their validation, but because it meant the mission itself, making renewable energy truly accessible, had gained converts beyond the initial believers. As I settled in for the evening, my phone buzzed with another message, this one from Marcus. "Production line final checks complete. Everything ready for Monday's first run. Thank you for today, Alex, for everything." The simple message encapsulated how much had changed. My brother, once my harshest critic, was now an ally in building the very vision he had dismissed. My parents, once fearful I was throwing away my future, now celebrated the future I had created. And I, once defined by opposition to their expectations, had found a way to integrate their support without compromising my independent path. The delusional dream had become not just a business reality, but a bridge rebuilding connections I had thought permanently damaged. Not because I had conceded to their vision, but because they had ultimately come to see mine, to recognize not just its commercial success, but its fundamental value. Tomorrow would bring the practical work of continuing to build that vision. But tonight, I allowed myself to appreciate how far we had all come, not just in business achievement, but in mutual understanding. The journey from delusional to visionary had transformed not only my professional path, but the relationships that mattered most. 6 months after the South Seattle facility opening, EcoNova had transformed from a promising startup to an industry leader. Production lines hummed at full capacity, fulfilling both residential orders and an ever-expanding roster of commercial contracts. Our workforce had grown to over 300 employees across both facilities, with specialized teams dedicated to residential systems, commercial applications, and next-generation research. The Pacific Northwest Hospital Group installation had become a showcase for our technology, attracting delegations from healthcare systems across the country and even internationally. What had begun as a pilot project now extended to 8 of their 12 facilities, with the remaining 4 scheduled for implementation within the year. Each successful installation generated new inquiries, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of growth that exceeded even our optimistic projections. I stood on the observation platform overlooking the South Seattle production floor, watching teams assemble our newest commercial storage units. The precision of their movements, the quiet efficiency of the process, All of it reflected the systems and culture we had built so carefully. It was a far cry from those early days in my garage, where every component had passed through my own hands. "Admiring your empire?" Maya asked, joining me at the railing. She had recently been promoted to Chief Technology Officer, overseeing both our current production technology and our research initiatives. "Just appreciating how far we've come," I replied, glancing at the tablet she carried. "Is that the Thompson University proposal?" She nodded, handing it to me. "Final draft. They want to implement our systems across their entire campus. 17 buildings in total. It would be our largest institutional contract yet." I scanned the document, noting the scale and complexity of the proposed implementation. Their sustainability goals are ambitious, carbon neutral by 2028, which is only possible with our technology, Maya pointed out. No other system could get them there within their budget constraints. This was the true validation of what we had built, not just commercial success, but tangible impact on how institutions approached renewable energy. Each contract represented not only revenue for EcoNova, but real progress toward more sustainable energy consumption. "The presentation team is ready whenever you are," Maya added. "Marcus has been working directly with their facilities department to address integration questions." The mention of my brother brought a smile. Marcus had exceeded all expectations in his role, transitioning from his initial 6-month contract to a permanent position as Director of Commercial Implementation. His understanding of large institutional needs combined with his growing expertise in our technology had made him invaluable as we expanded into the commercial sector. "Let's schedule the presentation for next week," I decided, handing back the tablet. "And let's include some of the hospital technical staff to speak directly to their experience with the system integration." As Maya departed to coordinate the arrangements, I continued my walkthrough of the facility. This had become a weekly ritual, connecting directly with production teams, observing workflow patterns, identifying potential improvements. Despite my increasingly busy schedule of investor meetings and strategic planning sessions, I maintained these hands-on tours as a way to stay grounded in the practical realities of our business. In the testing area, I paused to watch technicians putting a commercial unit through performance evaluations. The technical specifications displayed on their monitors showed efficiency ratings that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. This continuous improvement had been key to maintaining our market leadership, never resting on initial success, always pushing for better performance, greater efficiency, more intuitive user interfaces. "Looking good?" asked a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find my father observing the testing process with professional interest. Since the facility opening, he had become a regular visitor to EcoNova, acting as an informal advisor on manufacturing processes based on his decades of experience at Boeing. What had begun as occasional consultations had evolved into a weekly standing meeting, where he would tour the production floor with me before offering observations over lunch. "Exceeding specifications," I confirmed. "The new thermal management system is performing even better than projected." He nodded appreciatively, the engineer in him clearly impressed. "Your team's iterative approach is paying dividends. Small improvements compound significantly over time." We continued the tour together, my father asking thoughtful questions about production flow and quality control measures. His technical background gave him an understanding of the manufacturing challenges that many of our investors lacked, making his perspective particularly valuable as we scaled operations. "Your mother asked me to remind you about dinner Sunday," he mentioned as we concluded the walkthrough. "Marcus is bringing his new girlfriend. She's quite interested in renewable energy, apparently. Been following EcoNova since before she met your brother." I smiled at this detail. "I'll be there." These family dinners had become a monthly tradition since the facility opening, sometimes at my parents' hotel when they visited Seattle, sometimes at my home, occasionally at one of the city's better restaurants. What had once been tension-filled Occasions now flowed with genuine conversation and mutual respect. My parents had found ways to support my vision without trying to control it. I had found ways to welcome their interest without feeling judged by it. After my father departed, I returned to my office to prepare for a video conference with our East Coast investors. As I reviewed the quarterly projections, I reflected on how thoroughly our market position had solidified. Econova was no longer fighting for recognition or struggling to prove our concept. We had become the standard against which competitors measured themselves, the company that had redefined what was possible in energy storage technology. The video conference proceeded smoothly, with investors universally pleased by our expansion into commercial markets and the growing pipeline of institutional contracts. The questions focused not on whether our approach was viable, that had been definitively answered, but on how quickly we could scale to meet increasing demand. "We're considering a third facility," I explained in response to capacity questions. "Likely in the Portland area to better serve the California market. Preliminary site evaluations are underway, with timeline projections for operational status approximately 18 months from final site selection." The announcement generated enthusiastic support, with several investors immediately expressing interest in participating in the funding round that would finance the expansion. What once would have required extensive persuasion and proof of concept now elicited immediate confidence, the power of demonstrated success. After the call concluded, I found myself with a rare, quiet moment. I walked to the large windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, the same view I had contemplated in those early days when Econova existed primarily in my imagination. The city looked different now, or perhaps it was my perspective that had changed. Where once I had seen a landscape of challenges and uncertainties, I now saw a community where our technology was making a tangible difference, powering homes more affordably, enabling institutions to embrace sustainability, creating jobs that contributed to environmental solutions. My assistant knocked gently on the doorframe. "Alexandra, Noah's here for your meeting." Noah entered with his characteristic energy, brandishing a tablet displaying the latest industry reports. "Have you seen the new market share analysis? Econova is now officially the leading provider of residential energy storage systems in the Pacific Northwest, with commercial sector growth exceeding projections by 37%. I smiled at his enthusiasm. "I saw the numbers this morning. Very encouraging." "Encouraging?" He laughed, taking a seat across from my desk. "Alex, this is extraordinary. You've captured market share from established players in half the time we projected. And the customer satisfaction metrics are off the charts. 97% would recommend Econova systems to others." His excitement was justified. These metrics represented not just business success, but validation of our core mission, making renewable energy accessible and practical for average consumers and institutions. "The real test will be the national expansion," I pointed out. "The Portland facility is just the beginning. To truly transform the market, we need presence in multiple regions." Noah nodded, immediately shifting to strategic mode. Which brings me to the main purpose of my visit. I've been approached by 3 separate investment groups specifically interested in funding regional expansion. They followed Econova's development and are convinced the model can be replicated across different markets. We spent the next hour discussing expansion possibilities, the capital requirements, the regulatory variations across regions, the staffing and training challenges of maintaining consistent quality while scaling rapidly. These were good problems to have, questions of how to manage success rather than how to achieve it. As Noah prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "I've backed dozens of companies over the years, Alex, but what you've built with Econova is special. Not just commercially successful, but meaningfully impactful. You haven't just proven your skeptics wrong, you've created something that genuinely matters." His words stayed with me after he departed. In the early days, proving my family wrong had indeed been part of my motivation. a desire to validate my vision in the face of their dismissal. But somewhere along the journey, that motivation had evolved into something larger, more consequential than personal vindication. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, Marcus stopped by with the finalized plans for the Thompson University presentation. He looked different now than when he had first joined Echo Nova, more confident but less arrogant, professionally accomplished but personally humbled. "The technical specifications are all set," he reported, handing me a concise summary. "We've included direct comparisons to their current systems, with projected savings calculations and carbon reduction metrics." I scanned the document, appreciating its thoroughness. "This looks excellent. The energy consumption analysis is particularly compelling." "That was Maya's contribution," he acknowledged. Her modeling of their usage patterns revealed additional efficiency opportunities they hadn't considered. This easy collaboration between my brother and my earliest ally symbolized how thoroughly things had changed. They now worked together seamlessly, recognizing and respecting each other's expertise without the complications of our family history interfering. "Are you heading out?" Marcus asked, noticing I was gathering my things. I nodded. "Dinner with Sofia Rivera. She's in town for the Renewable Energy Conference." "Your MIT professor? The one who connected you with Noah?" "The same," I confirmed, thinking fondly of the mentor who had believed in my vision when my own family couldn't. "She's keynoting the conference tomorrow on institutional adoption of renewable technology. EcoNova features prominently in her research." Marcus smiled. "From case study to industry leader, quite a journey." It was indeed. As I drove to the restaurant where Sophia waited, I reflected on the full-circle nature of this moment. Sophia had been the first experienced voice to validate my concept when my family had dismissed it. Now, she would present EcoNova as a market-transforming success story to industry leaders from across the country. The restaurant overlooked Elliott Bay, the water shimmering with evening light. Sophia stood as I approached the table, embracing me warmly. "Alexandra Chen," she said, her voice rich with pride. "The woman who revolutionized energy storage when everyone said it couldn't be done." We settled into our seats, ordering wine to celebrate our reunion. Sophia had followed EcoNova's development from afar, offering occasional advice, but mainly watching as her former student transformed an innovative concept into market reality. "Your keynote mentions EcoNova?" I asked, after we had caught up. "On personal news." She nodded. "You're my primary case study in disruptive innovation. The presentation traces your journey from concept to market leadership, emphasizing how questioning traditional assumptions led to breakthrough approaches. It was humbling to be presented as an example of innovation, particularly by someone whose own technical expertise I deeply respected." "Our team deserves the credit," I said. "I may have had the initial concept, but what EcoNova has become is the result of many brilliant minds working together." "Of course," Sophia agreed. "But those minds coalesced around your vision, Alexandra. That's not insignificant. You created the conditions for collaborative innovation by first believing something was possible when conventional wisdom said it wasn't." As our dinner progressed, Sophia shared stories of other former students pursuing various technical innovations, some successful, others still struggling to prove their concepts. Her perspective spanned decades of engineering evolution, giving her unique insight into what differentiated transformative ideas from mere improvements. "The truly revolutionary innovations," she observed, "often come from questioning basic assumptions rather than incrementally improving existing approaches." That's what you did with energy storage. You stepped back and asked why conventional systems were designed as they were, what constraints were truly immutable versus merely accepted. Her analysis captured exactly what had driven my initial work. The frustration with existing systems that seemed designed to maintain artificial cost barriers rather than maximize accessibility. By questioning those foundational approaches, I had indeed discovered opportunities that established companies had overlooked. "And now?" Sophia asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. With Econova established as a market leader, with commercial contracts expanding, with your initial vision validated beyond question, what drives you now, Alexandra? The question made me pause. The motivation had indeed shifted as the company evolved from struggling startup to industry leader. "Scale," I said finally. "Meaningful impact requires scale. We've proven the concept, developed the technology, established the market. Now we need to expand access. Make these systems available to more homes, more institutions, more communities. The technology only matters if it reaches the people who need it." Sophia nodded, satisfied with this answer. From innovation to implementation to transformation, that's the true measure of visionary leadership. Not just creating something new, but ensuring it creates meaningful change. As we concluded our dinner, Sophia mentioned she would be touring the South Seattle facility the following day after her keynote. "I've seen the technical specifications," she said, "but I want to see the actual production process, how you've scaled from prototype to mass manufacturing while maintaining the innovation culture." "I'll make sure Marcus gives you the full tour," I promised. He designed much of the production workflow, incorporating our core values into the physical layout. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Your brother? The one who—" "The very same," I confirmed with a smile. "People evolve, perspectives change. He's now one of our most valuable team members." She shook her head slightly, impressed by this additional dimension of the Econova story. "That may be the most remarkable part of your journey, Alexandra. Not just building a successful company, but transforming the very relationships that once limited your vision." As I drove home that evening, Sophia's observation resonated deeply. The technical achievements, the market success, the industry recognition, all of these were significant. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation had been in the human connections surrounding the business. My family, once dismissive of my entrepreneurial ambitions, now took genuine pride in Econova's success. My brother, once my most vocal critic, now applied his considerable talents to advancing the vision he had previously mocked. And I, once defined by opposition to their expectations, had found a way to welcome their support without compromising my independence. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to prepare for Sophia's visit following her keynote. As I reviewed my schedule for the day, my assistant brought in the morning's business publications. The front page of the Wall Street Journal featured a special section on renewable energy innovation, with Econova prominently highlighted as a case study in market disruption. The article quoted industry analysts on the Chen approach to energy storage, a term I hadn't heard before, describing how our technology had fundamentally altered expectations about affordability and efficiency in renewable systems. It noted that established competitors were now scrambling to develop comparable solutions, having recognized too late the market demand for truly accessible storage options. What struck me most was a sidebar featuring quotes from early Econova customers, describing how our systems had made renewable energy practical for their households or businesses. "For the first time, the numbers made sense," one homeowner explained. "The Econova system paid for itself in under 4 years, and now our energy costs are minimal, while our environmental impact is significantly reduced." This was the true measure of our success, not industry recognition or investor excitement, but actual impact on individual energy consumers. Each installation represented a household or institution, reducing both costs and environmental footprint, multiplied thousands of times across our customer base. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Sophia's keynote just ended. Standing ovation. EcoNova featured extensively, heading to facility now for tour. I smiled, picturing Sophia presenting our story to industry leaders, the journey from dismissed concept to market-changing reality. The conference attendees would include representatives from the very companies that had once rejected our approach as impractical or premature. Now they were studying EcoNova as a model of innovation. An hour later, I met Sophia and Marcus as they concluded their tour of the production facility. Sophia's expression was one of impressed satisfaction, like a teacher seeing a student exceed even optimistic expectations. "Remarkable implementation," she said as I joined them. "The production flow, the quality control systems, the integration of feedback loops from field performance, all of it reflects the same innovative thinking that drove the original technology." Marcus nodded in agreement. "That's been our focus, ensuring that the core values of accessibility and efficiency permeate every aspect of production, not just the technology design." Watching them discuss technical details with mutual respect and enthusiasm, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This moment represented everything I had worked toward, not just a successful company, but a transformative approach to energy that was changing both market expectations and individual lives. As we walked Sophia out following her visit, she paused to take a final look at the facility. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "in engineering education, we often focus on technical problems, material limitations, efficiency constraints, cost factors. But the most significant barriers to innovation are rarely technical. They're perceptual, the assumptions about what's possible, what's practical, what's worth pursuing." She turned to face me directly. "What you've accomplished with EcoNova isn't just a technical achievement or a business success. It's a perceptual breakthrough. You've changed how an entire industry thinks about what's possible in energy storage. That's a lasting legacy, Alexandra." Her words captured exactly what had driven me from the beginning. Not just building a better storage system, but challenging fundamental assumptions about renewable energy accessibility. The technical innovation had been a means to that broader end, the vehicle for a more significant transformation. After Sophia departed, Marcus and I returned to the main building for our scheduled meeting about the Thompson University presentation. As we walked, he seemed thoughtful. "Your professor really gets it," he observed. "The vision behind EcoNova, I mean. Not just the technology or the business model, but the core purpose." I nodded. She was the first person outside my own head who truly understood what I was trying to accomplish. When everyone else saw technical obstacles, she saw transformative potential. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said what perhaps had been on his mind for some time. "I'm sorry I didn't see it. That I dismissed your vision rather than supporting it from the beginning." We had never directly addressed those early days, his mockery of my plans, his attempts to dissuade investors, his certainty that I was making a catastrophic career mistake. By unspoken agreement, we had focused on present collaboration rather than past conflict. "What matters is that you see it now," I said simply, "and that you're helping build it into something even stronger than I originally imagined." He smiled, relieved by this response. Family dynamics are complicated. I think we were both trying to earn our place in our parents' eyes, just taking very different approaches. This insight felt surprisingly accurate. While I had rejected my father's insistence on corporate security, I had still been seeking his recognition, just for innovation rather than conformity. Marcus had embraced the traditional path, but ultimately found greater fulfillment in the very venture he had once dismissed. "Well," I said as we approached the conference room where the presentation team waited, "I'd say we've both found our place now, on our own terms." 6 years after that rainy drive from Portland when my family had called my dreams delusional, I stood at the podium in our newest facility, EcoNova Portland, serving the expanding West Coast market. The ribbon-cutting ceremony marked our third manufacturing center, with planning already underway for East Coast expansion the following year. Among the gathered guests were my parents, seated in the front row, Marcus, now our Executive Vice President of Commercial Operations, Maya, whose technical leadership had kept us at the forefront of the industry, Jackson, who had believed enough to invest when no one else would, and Noah, whose early backing had enabled our first major expansion. As I addressed the assembled employees, investors, and community representatives, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. From dismissed concept to industry leadership, from garage prototype to multi-facility manufacturer, from family skepticism to collaborative support. Energy accessibility isn't just a technical challenge or a business opportunity, I told the audience. It's a transformative possibility, the potential to make sustainable choices practical for everyone, not just early adopters or those with significant resources. At EcoNova, we've never been content with incremental improvements to existing systems. We've consistently questioned fundamental assumptions about what's possible, what's practical, what's necessary. I glanced at my family, seeing in their proud expressions how thoroughly perspectives had evolved. My father, once dismissive of entrepreneurial risk, now admired the very qualities he had once cautioned against. My mother, once worried about my career stability, now proudly shared EcoNova's achievements with everyone in her social circle. And Marcus, once my fiercest critic, now helped lead the company with genuine commitment to its mission. The journey from concept to reality is rarely linear, I continued. It involves setbacks, recalibrations, moments of doubt. But when the core vision addresses a genuine need, when it offers a better solution to a significant problem, persistence ultimately prevails over skepticism. As I concluded my remarks and prepared to officially open the new facility, I thought about what truly constituted success in this journey. It wasn't proving critics wrong or vindicating my initial decision. It wasn't even the business metrics, impressive as they had become. It was the tangible impact. Thousands of homes and institutions now powered more affordably and sustainably because we had challenged prevailing assumptions about what was possible. After the ceremonial ribbon cutting and the tours that followed, my family gathered for a private celebration dinner. The conversation flowed easily, touching on company developments, industry trends, and personal news. There was no lingering awkwardness, no undercurrent of old conflicts, just the comfortable exchange of a family that had found new ways to connect across once divisive differences. As dessert was served, my father raised his glass in an uncharacteristically emotional toast. "To Alexandra," he said, his voice slightly rough with feeling, "who saw possibilities we couldn't see, who created something meaningful by questioning assumptions, who taught us all to look beyond conventional wisdom toward greater potential." The simple acknowledgement meant more than any business accolade. Could have, not because I still needed his validation, but because it represented how thoroughly perceptions could change when confronted with demonstrated reality. Later that evening, as I stood on the balcony of my hotel room overlooking Portland, the city where my family had once dismissed my dreams, I reflected on the full-circle nature of this moment. The journey had begun with rejection and proceeded through determination, validation, expansion, and ultimately transformation, not just of an industry, but of relationships once damaged by mismatched expectations. The true measure of vision isn't just its commercial viability, but its power to change perspectives, to demonstrate possibilities where others see only limitations. EcoNova had done precisely that, both in the energy market and within my own family dynamics. What had once been labeled delusional was now recognized as visionary, not through argument or persuasion, but through persistent demonstration of what was truly possible. My phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "Thompson University. Board just unanimously approved our proposal. Full campus implementation begins next month." Another milestone, another opportunity to expand our impact. I smiled, thinking of how far we had come and how much further we could still go. The journey from delusional to visionary wasn't a destination, but an ongoing process, continuing to question assumptions, to challenge limitations, to transform what seemed impossible into practical reality. That, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of this entire experience. True innovation requires not just technical insight or business acumen, but the courage to pursue possibilities that others dismiss, to see potential where conventional wisdom sees only obstacles. Sometimes, what appears delusional to others is simply vision that exceeds their current perspective. And sometimes, those who dismiss your dreams most thoroughly are the ones who eventually ask to be part of making them reality. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.